Okay, thank you, Dinesh, for inviting me to speak to this group. My name is Bruce Gilks, and I am the project leader for the LinuxOne community clouds. And I'm going to take you through kind of what it is, what we do, and hopefully it'll spark some interest and some ideas and possible usage from your group or others. And so I'm going to turn off my camera at this time and share my screen. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my screen. So we call it the LinuxOne Community Cloud. It's a little bit more than that. So I tend to start to call it the IBM Community Cloud. We do a little bit of ZOS work there, not a lot. I'll talk through that. So the IBM Community Clouds is a project that was started back in late 2015. I took over the project in 2018. And basically, the idea was to get LinuxOne in front of users who otherwise may have difficulty getting access to a real LinuxOne. It's been very successful. We use it with a lot of different folks, IBMers, and of course the general public. And I'll go through all of that as well. And we also have an open source development side of this as well. So we host this physically at Marist College. We have a joint project with Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. We host it there very specifically for a couple of reasons. One reason is so that we can have wide open access, no VPNs required for access. And also, so it's kind of at a neutral site, right? So the idea behind this is an open computing platform, LinuxOne, but not inside of IBM. It's outside of IBM. It's open, and users can feel free to innovate and to develop and use this platform. So both Marist College personnel and IBMers develop and administer this. And so let me just, that's kind of the history of it. I'll get started here. So we physically, it's really four distinct clouds across two physical IBM mainframes or Z systems. We have an IBM LinuxOne 3, which houses our largest cloud, which is the LinuxOne Community Cloud. It also houses our Red Hat OpenShift environment, which is also public to users as well. And I'll go through these. And then we also have an open source software cloud, which is a more permanent home for open source developers and communities, which we forge relationships with and give them a kind of a permanent place to develop and certify their code on LinuxOne and Z systems. We just added a new Z15, a second Z15. We expect to grow the LinuxOne Community Cloud into that environment. We also expect to grow our Red Hat cloud into that environment, potentially also the open source software cloud. That new Z15 is a mixed use Z15, so it's got a lot of Linux processors, but it's also got a collection of ZOS processors. We also have a ZOS cloud. It's small and it's a little bit more, how shall I say, difficult to make public because of ZOS and the intellectual property and all of that within IBM. So we don't hand out ZOS to everybody. It's kind of a guarded, but I just want to let you know that it's there. So the LinuxOne Community Cloud. So this is a public facing environment where users can self-register and sign up for essentially a virtual Linux server on LinuxOne. They get a 60-day trial or a 60-day trial with the option to extend another 60 days. And then after that's over, they can register again. So they can just keep coming back for free. And we give them a quota of one server. They get two virtual CPUs, four gigabytes of memory, and 50 gigabytes of disk. This seems to serve the general public fairly well. These users are typically new to Z users, new to LinuxOne. Maybe they want to test their code there or just learn a little bit. And so these resources seem to do what they need. Today we're offering RHEL 7, Red Hat 8, Ubuntu 20, and actually I need to update that. It's 20 and Ubuntu 22, as well as the SUSE Linux 15. We try to maintain the supported versions of the distributions, right? So when RHEL 7 goes out of support, we'll drop that as well, so we stay current and correct. The users get full root access with SSH, so they can log in, they can do anything they want to, they can break their server. There's a dashboard, which I'll show you in a minute. And if they do something bad and break their server, they only hurt themselves. They can delete the server and make a new one. We are available to anyone in the world. Like I said, there's no VPNs involved. You just log in directly through IP. The registration is fully automated. We have a very, very small team that develops and supports this entire environment. So we try and automate as much as possible so that the end user is getting fast service, fast registration turnovers, and there is, as little humans in the way as possible. Um, like I mentioned, there's a browser-based dashboard for server lifecycle control. I'll show that. And then at the bottom is the URL for we have kind of a homepage, I'll call it, on IBM Developer, and that's where a user can go and either log into their already existing environment or register for a new environment. So here's what the dashboard looks like. It's very, very simple, and we do that on purpose. You can start, stop, create, and delete your server if there's any issues. Like I said, users can just blow it away and create a new one. Real simple dashboard. We also offer Red Hat OpenShift. So this is a fairly restricted environment in so much as it's not a full cluster of Red Hat. There is no cluster admin credentials. So a user is in a shared space. So there's a lot they can do. It's full Red Hat OpenShift. This is an area we're going to be growing this year or later, I believe. And I'll talk to that a little bit later. But users can also register here in the same way they registered for a virtual Linux server. They get a user ID and password. They can log into this public environment, and they can deploy code. They can deploy directly from GitHub. And this is really just used as a way to showcase OpenShift running on LinuxOne. And again, this is one of those other clouds, I call it, that are all running on the LinuxOne, physical platform. And so the open source software developer cloud, this was the other cloud that I mentioned. This is designed for long-term open source development communities to get access to LinuxOne virtual servers. It's a highly available environment, multi-LPAR, and they essentially get it as long as they need it. They re-up it every year, but as long as they need it, they have it. We've got users who have been using this for years on end. We also have more flexibility in the operating systems. We can support some of the older ones like SLES 12 and Ubuntu 18. We also have flexibility in how many servers they get, as well as the resources, because of course, many of the open source development groups, the larger ones, need larger number of servers, larger memory spaces, disk, and CPU. So we can customize that. This is also self-service based. They also get a dashboard that looks similar to the one I showed you before, with a couple of extra little things on there. But in general, they'll have a different set of quotas, and they can also start, stop, delete, create servers as they need. A lot of these users also use this for CI and CD build services. This is open source only, right? So this is not to be used for ISV type development. No proprietary code. The whole theme here is open source. There's an onboarding process. Usually like an IBMer will nominate a group, and we'll take a look at it and take a look at what the resources they need, and get them set up with credentials. And we try to get everybody on board as much as possible. Um, and I just have Elizabeth Joseph is somebody I work with very, very closely in the open source group at IBM, and she's a great contact to find out if your um, open source group that you want to nominate is a good fit for IBM and this platform. So that's the Open Source Software Developer Cloud. Um, this is currently kind of what LinuxOne open source software ecosystem looks like. It's growing all the time. It's literally hundreds of open source packages. Again, that's the theme, is to foster and develop open source and to certify it and run it on Linux. Like I mentioned, we do have a ZOS cloud. It's small. We've got a few internal IBM open source projects. We also run Zoe and Node.js there as well under IBM supervision, as well as the IBM academic initiative, and all of that runs on ZOS in that environment. Like I said, it's a smaller environment. It's there. It's something we'd like to grow, but getting past some of the internal ZOS stuff is a bit challenging. And so that's an area that we're actually working on to see how we can actually grow that more. So we have a page. This is called our Fast Start Guides page. This lives on that initial home page down here at the bottom. And essentially what this is this is an area for new users who've registered and signed up and gotten a server, and now they're like, okay, what do I do? And so this kind of gives them a number of guides in which they can do some OpenShift stuff. They can do some basic open source installations and testing and things like that. This is changing. We're always, looking for new contributors to this. So, if this is something that you want to contribute to, feel free to let me know. These are usually like 20 to 45-minute lab exercises where a user can just cookbook, follow along step by step, and get something going after they've registered and create a server. So some numbers, just so you know. So we have probably since its inception, if I go back and look at the number of registrations and the number that were actually accepted, which are most of them, we're probably around like 40,000 users have registered since 2015. We had about 10,000, just under 10,000 users last year. There's been a fairly steep uptick in users in the last couple of years, which is great. We do operate in at least 145 countries, as long as last time I've checked. This could be a little bit old. We run around 1,600 public virtual servers, so that doesn't include the open source or the OpenShift stuff. That's just the public servers. It hovers around 1,600 concurrent deployments, which essentially means 1,600 users. We also work a lot with colleges and universities on coursework. In other words, we have a number of professors who will come to us, and they'll run a class, and they'll have their students go out and get servers, and they'll run the class about LinuxOne and Linux. So we have a number of servers that support that. We also support hackathons and events and different things like that. From an open source software development perspective, I counted today, we've got 76 unique open source projects. So these are the users that are running in that semi-permanent open source software cloud, where we have kind of an official IBM relationship with them, and they're actually certifying and building and developing open source code for LinuxOne. They use about 287 virtual servers, around 1,183 virtual CPUs, 3.5 terabytes of memory, and about 40 terabytes of disk, just to give you some scale. The LinuxOne Community Cloud public area, like I said, 1,600 users. So that essentially means 1,600 virtual Linux servers running there, 3,200 virtual CPUs, 6.5 terabytes of memory, and 80 terabytes of disk. So there's, it's highly active, a lot going on. And this is our latest. So we work with another group to create this artificial intelligence and machine learning event system. So a number of folks like to host events and guide like a group of users. It could be college related, it could be client related, it could be open like a call for code type thing or something like that. And they will guide users through a lab. So this was recently created. It's a Linux only environment where a user can pull down a Docker container and get all of the latest latest AI and machine learning packages, and we run them through a lab. I've got the GitHub address here in the lower right corner, so you can see how the lab goes. And this is just kind of our packaged environment that works really well when you're hosting an event and you're trying to show off AI and LinuxOne. Just thought I'd kind of advertise that. This is what we refer to as our LinuxOne Community Cloud Reference Architecture. Um, the way we build this is no secret. This can be shared with the client. This is one of these, how do you build an open source self-service cloud on LinuxOne? And this is kind of our recipe, from storage to LPARs to, you know, ZVM and KVM and everything here. It's pretty high level. For the most part, we use all open source when it comes to LDAP server databases. The one IBM product we use is the IBM Cloud Infrastructure Center, which is a Z-only layer that sits between ZVM or KVM and essentially provisions the virtual servers for us. So everything else is open source. On the right-hand side, our dashboard, it's completely custom Java code, as well as our registration management system. So this is just kind of a really high-level recipe, not like a recipe, but a high-level view on the pieces and parts that we use to put together this entire environment. And again, like I said, this is not IBM confidential. This can be shared. So I put together some typical use cases, and I'm hoping after this call that you guys can think of other ones. So for the LinuxOne public cloud, so it's new to LinuxOne, self-education and trial. It's open source code compatibility and testing, users who do their own open source testing but may not have a relationship with IBM officially. I mentioned the academic course material that is also used. Hackathons, worldwide events like Call for Code, and then there's a number of different events that we do throughout the year, or that we support, I'll say. And then, of course, OpenShift adoption on LinuxOne. So those are kind of the use cases for the public LinuxOne community cloud. The open source software cloud, of course, this is for the open source development communities, and this is for raw development as well as certification of the S390X and LinuxOne packages. CI/CD pipelines for S390X also live here, and these are the key open source software cloud use cases. I would think that if there were research use cases, they would probably live in this same open source software cloud environment because they would be longer term, they would have unique resource requirements. But under research, I just threw a couple here: artificial intelligence on LinuxOne, and then I would just say open it up to ideas on other research projects that would either benefit from LinuxOne or would showcase the LinuxOne platform. So our futures, as I come to an end here, our futures. I mentioned OpenShift. This is an area that, and part of the reason we got our second Z15 in there is we want to grow the OpenShift environment. We want to add Cloud Pak for data. So we're going to be doing that later this year. We'll be doing AI and machine learning stuff within Cloud Pak for data. That will be a public environment as well as also used for events and private type of things. And the other area, which is not public, but will be this notion of being able to create full OpenShift clusters on demand. And this is going to be used for tech sales, for client POCs, and I'm thinking possible research projects as well. This will be Ansible based, and it'll be like, okay, I have an event coming up, or I have a proof of concept, and I want to create a complete, OpenShift cluster with admin authority. I use it for 2 weeks or for a month or for whatever the project needs, and then we blow it away and reclaim those resources. So this is, two key areas that we're working on for growth, as well as just other just user growth in the public space. So I think that is probably, yeah, that's it for me.